Hello everyone, George here, and in this video we're going to take a look at the bathroom area and try to finish that out. As you notice, we've got a lot of different elements on the walls. We've got checkers on the side walls. We have pizzas on the sides as well, and of course our restroom signs to put in. Then of course we have these border edges on the sides, which might be a red color. It might just be too dark in grayscale for us to tell in particular. But we have two different sizes of checkers that we're going to have to deal with, and of course the opposite side of the wall looks like it's got some pizzas going on as well. So all of that will have to be addressed in the following video. Now let's jump over into Maya and take a look at our current bathroom area. So here it is selected, and we're going to notice a few problems. One problem is the fact that none of it's actually combined together, and we don't have any doors between anything. But my intent is to grab all of this and then take it out and then place it into another scene where I'm going to work on it separate from everything else, and then when I'm done I'll bring it back in. But for the moment we need to make some cuts for that doorway, because if this is to the bathroom it's probably not going to have the door, so we're going to use our insert edge loop tool to go ahead and insert edges on both sides of the door. And of course I need to resize Maya and make sure my panels are the right size, because right now I can't see a darn thing. So there we go, everything's been moved properly. Okay, let's go ahead and insert that first loop on one side and on the other side using the relative version. Then we're just going to grab the whole thing, double click it, and then I'm going to V-snap it over into the inside of that door. You will notice that there's some molding, but we'll get to that later on. It's going to be used as kind of like a cover-up to change from one location to the next, in case for some reason we do actually move around in this area in our game. So mess up a little bit and tweak it and move it over. There we go. And the other one looks just fine. So now we can delete the faces on that side. And what we're left with are the faces on the opposite side that now need to be cut open and realigned. And we're going to do the exact same thing again. Hit F8, go to Insert Edge mode, put two edges anywhere, and then realign them using our snapping tools, our vertex snapping tools from one side to the next. There we go. And the next one, perfect. Now, it's not just that door. Now, okay, first I'm going to delete the door, but that's going to end up being a mistake for me. I'm going to need to use that door size to make the door that goes into the kitchen. So in just a few seconds, I need to undo everything I just did. So going back in time, I have now grabbed that particular face, and now we're going to duplicate it and pull it out. Of course, after a few seconds of trying to desperately select that one particular item by moving inside of the area, I finally get it. Now I move it out after I center the pivot, and then I rotate it 90 degrees and then put it up flush against the back side of this thing. But that's not good enough, because I need to know it's centered within that area as well. So what I am going to do is insert an edge loop right down the center of this thing, and then okay, I screwed that up. Make sure it's not relative mode. Then I'm going to go ahead and grab the door. Once again, struggling to do so, going to F8 and then unselecting everything else, moving that over to the side, and then moving that back to the area there. Now I can insert my edge loops going down the hallway and then make the cuts for the top and the bottom of the door. Now the cut for the top is already there because we already had the cut for the other door. So all I need to do here is make sure I have two cuts on either side, and I V-snap them to each side, the left and the right side of the door. And then after that, I'm not going to need that door piece anymore, that polygon, and I'm going to right click and basically just delete it. Okay, now we got the same problem here with the bathroom doors. We've got some molding on there, but I'm not really going to worry about that. We can come back and tweak that as much as we want to in the future. What I am going to worry about is putting more edge loops in there. And really, I'm kind of worried about the size of these bathrooms and the webcam or the cameras seeing the back ends of them, but realistically the way the layout is set up, there's not an easy way for me to do this because the men's room crashes into the kitchen. So we're going to ignore that for the moment, and I'm just going to start inserting edge loops all over the place in relative mode, just like before. And then I'm going to, of course, snap them to the insides of where the molding is supposed to be. So now I grab that edge loop and I move it over to the side, do the same thing for the other door, and then move to the second door, and once again snap it to both sides. And now we delete the faces so that we can actually enter into the bathroom areas. Now the next thing is the fact that these are separate elements, therefore we're going to need to combine them all together. So go to object mode and combine them. Now that they're combined, I can easily introduce the doorways on the opposite side. So let's go ahead and do that. Another relatives, line them up on the other side, and then of course delete the faces on the inside as well once I'm finished with the opposite side. Once again, this is a narration as opposed to me talking live. I did have it, however, for some reason I experienced non-linear time shift, and it became almost impossible to edit all of the stuff. I spent over an hour trying to do it, and finally I gave up and decided I'm just going to narrate this stuff. But anyway, just going through now, and we're going to be bridging these gaps for each one. So I need to bridge from the inside of the bathroom to the outside of the bathroom so there's no gaps. Now this could also have been handled by just placing some sort of a border around that area, but I'm going to just go ahead and manipulate these and bridge them and close them off so I don't have to worry about pretty much anything. Moving on to the other side now, we're going to bridge all those elements as well. And now that I'm pretty much done with bridging all these different elements together, let's go ahead and continue to bridge, just finishing up. And on the other side is the last one. The scale of this level is a little bit off. I really need to increase it by a factor of 10, I'd say, to make manipulating things easier inside of Maya. But now that I do have all that done, I can go to File, Export Selection, and we're going to export this out as our bathroom area. Now we'll go to File, Open, and open up the bathroom area so we have that completely separate from the rest of our scene, and we can begin working on making that look pretty. Moving it to the center of the origin, we'll place it in the right place later on by just snapping to one of the sides or the vertices. Looking at a reference material, we notice the borders that we've got to deal with, and of course we also notice the checkerboard location. So what I really need to do is get some of a frame of reference to know how tall that is, because it is shorter in one area, and within the bathrooms it looks like it's actually taller. And of course we got to count the number of squares that are there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Roughly 8 of them go in there. So I want to use a meter as my sort of guideline. So I take this cube, move the pivot to the bottom, move it over, and then I'm going to make a edge loop cut across this entire thing. And I'm going to do it over on the other side too. And I'm going to do it in the last area as well. Now, I am noticing that even after I'm snapping, that for some reason the edge loop doesn't continue all the way around, and that's because I actually missed placement of one of my bridgings. So I'm going to have to jump in and take a look to make sure that I did screw things up a bit. So here I'm attempting to do another one of my edge loops, and that's when I'm noticing that they're not going all the way across properly, even after I align them just fine. But if I end up looking, you'll see that I have not bridged that element right there. So now I grab both sides and I start bridging those pieces together to fix the problem. Now I'll only need to place one edge loop down for that side of things, and then one other edge loop down for the other side, saving me a little bit of time. Just checking to make sure I didn't screw anything else up. Looks all good so far. Now I need to add the edge loop on that other side, and because it's cut off by 2 doors, there's really nothing I can do. I have to make that edge loop myself. So I do that and I line it back up. Now I go ahead and double click and select all those faces. And we are going to do a slight extrusion outward to give it that molding or whatever it is on the walls. Looking at the reference material again, just getting a better sense of what I need to do. I think it's about time that I moved on to the checkerboards themselves. The floor first. But I'm going to want to separate the floor from everything else. So we're going to end up going into a side view and then just selecting all of the bottom. And then we're going to shift right click and we're going to extract the floor from the rest of it. Now we can assign a new material for this object, and we're just going to call it checkerboard kitchen or chicken bathroom checkerboard _M. Go to our file, And then now all we need to do is find the checkerboard image in our textures folder and load it in. There we are. There's the image. So let's go ahead and load that up. Perfect. And you'll notice our UVs are an absolute mess. So we're going to grab the entire floor now, and we're going to do a planar mapping from the vertical. And they're still way too big. So we're going to have to scale these things up. Or I should say, I'm using the scale up in order to sample more of the texture. And that was a misnomer. The tool I'm using is scaling down, but in reality, my UVs are growing to sample more texture space beyond the 0 and 1 area. And now I'm just getting a little bit nitpicky, trying to make sure that things line up just right and I have just enough squares in that area to be proper. And that's when I notice I have a tiny seam on the edge of that. So I decide to go in and manually tweak where it is. I just shift it over ever so slightly so that you're not going to notice that little white line right there. And you really don't notice it on the other side either, so everything looks pretty well. Now what I'm going to do is actually use this one tiny piece of the wall as a template for designing the rest of the walls. So the idea being I'm going to need Photoshop open, and we are going to, so here we are. So you can see we've got the checkerboard, we've got the molding, and then we've got the actual wall up at the top. And I just need something to give me those lines so I know where things begin and end. So I'm going to select all these elements, then do a UV mapping on them. Well, actually, before I do that, I decide that I don't want to mess with anything. So I do a duplicate and I move it out and extract it. Now I can work with this object by itself. Now I can grab the entire thing, taking a look at my UVs, realizing how absolute junk they are. And I'm going to need to use the planar mapping on the entire thing to make this work out. So grabbing the object, or not. So grabbing the object, using a planar map, fixing it, making sure it's coming from the X direction, hitting close. And now I have my guidelines for how I'm going to paint this thing in Photoshop. So I'm going to F8, so I'm in object mode, and I'm going to go ahead and make a UV snapshot of that and save it out. Now inside of Photoshop, we are going to want to open that up and take a look at the image. And you know what? Why don't I share something with you? I had an amazing day yesterday. Adam Savage decided to tour my VR center. He just happened to be stopping by. He was doing a show in Atlantic City, and he heard that we had a cave system. And I was pleased beyond belief to give him a presentation, even though it was only a few minutes long. But anyway, back to work. Let's go to Open, scroll on down to our repository for FNAF, open up our textures, and find our UVW map. So now you can see the importance of those lines that I have. I know exactly where the checker is, I know exactly where the border is going to be, and then of course I know where the wall begins as well. Now I've opened up my checkerboard texture. I'm going to go ahead and paste that in, and now I'm going to downscale that and keep doing that until I get something very close to what I want. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and a little bit of an 8th element on the bottom. I'm probably just going to go for a straight 8. So we need a little bit more scaling to make this work. Pretty close. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 right there. And then I'm just going to fudge the end of it just a little bit. No one is ever going to notice. And now once I have that set up, I'm going to say apply. I'm going to duplicate that layer and move it over. And then I'm going to do it once more, but this one's going to kind of overlap the other one. But the good news is that from one side to the other, it does alternate from black to white, so I'm perfect. Well, almost perfect. Now I'm going to make a selection on the top area and go to the bottom. And I want to fill that with that red color for the molding that we saw or have seen in different areas. It might be a darker color, it might be a brown, but red seems to be pretty prominent, especially in the more lit areas. So I'm going to assume that it's going to be a red color. So basically all I did was make a selection and tweaking that selection ever so slightly by removing the guidelines so it's a little bit taller up. Now that I have that, rename my layer, and we're going to fill this layer in with a nice color red. Fill it in, and you know what? Not so happy with that. That kind of looks like I don't know, it's not quite dark enough. So I'm going to go and first of all, I'm going to mask the layer so I can fill the entire layer, and I'm going to just push it over a little bit more to a saturated version of red, and I'm a little bit more happy with that than the other color, the slightly more pastel red. Now I need a grime texture, some kind of a texture, not apparently the band or whatever that is, but a texture of some wall that I'm going to use just to give it some noise. I don't like using standard noise a lot of times. It's too notable, or noticeable. So I'm going to grab just about any image I can that looks gross, and we're going to move this in, but I'm going to make an error and I'm going to have to delete it because this needs to be tileable from one section to the next. So I'm going to have to undo everything I'm doing and delete it out, and then bring it into a new image. Paste it all in. We are going to change its image size to a power of 2. So 1024 by 1024. Go ahead and hit OK. Now that we have that, all we need to do is offset everything. So View. I'm going to sharpen it first though, because it was pretty blurry. Now I'm going to go ahead and do a vertical blur, or I should say a motion blur on it. Might seem strange, but I just want some motion in one direction. And we're going to lighten it up using levels, and then of course desaturate it as well. Now I'm playing with the colors. I want it to be more of a red color. Can't really get that because of the differences between those colors. You see I have the reds and the yellows going on, so I colorize the image instead. I just play around for a second making sure there isn't a better color red I can work with, and there really isn't. So I hit OK. Now I need to go to View, and we are going to sharpen it a little bit more. And once again I screw up. I bring it in too early because I've done all that work, but I still have not offset it and made sure that the thing will tile properly. So I hit apply, and well, just in a few seconds, you're going to see what happens. I'm going to delete it, get rid of it, and offset this thing by 1024 by 1024. So using my healing brush tool, just going to, really I only need to do the vertical elements to heal. The side elements don't matter as much because I don't expect it to tile vertically. But I'm just going to go ahead and do it anyway. And I'm also going to get rid of that dark seam right there. It's just too prominent. I don't want it, when it repeats, I don't want that to be something that continually happens over and over and over again. So let's re-offset it back to the way it was. Take a look at it. Looks good enough for what I'm going to be using it for. Control A, Control C, or Control Shift A, or excuse me, Control Shift C, copy this over, bring it in here, apply it. Then we're going to overlay that on top of it. This takes just a little bit of time and patience just to get something that I actually enjoy, but eventually it's noisy enough, and I go ahead and I blur it a little bit because it turns out it just didn't look good sharpened. Now I'm really just more interested in the background. So I'm going to move my UVs up to the top and rename them so I don't forget, because I almost used that as my backdrop, and move that down. And now we're going to have our wall. Now I just need to find a good texture of a wall. You can see the walls are pretty much just gray with some noise going on, so that won't work easily. And that wall's pretty scratched up. So going down, scrolling around, looking for something that looks kind of natural. Let's go to our settings now, and size, make sure it's large. Actually, never mind, larger than 2 megapixels. And we start to see some pretty good walls here and there. I was wondering about that one, maybe just desaturating it, but after second thought, I kind of realized, hey, there's too much of a gradient of color from one end to the other. That's going to be a pain for me to fix, so let's keep moving on. Then I found this nice texture right here, kind of like a tile texture. And I figure if I desaturate that, that's going to look pretty nice as a wall. So I grab that, pretty huge image, copy it, and I paste it on over in as a new image. So my first order of business is to duplicate it, and I actually screw this up. I'm supposed to be duplicating it, inverting the colors, and then using it to offset the lights and the darks in the image. But I forget to do that, and well, I end up just deleting it in a few seconds. Now I desaturate the underlying image because I want to go with a white, a grayish background. I do change the levels a little bit to make it a bit brighter because it's a dark game. So in reality, things are going to be lighter when the object is going to appear lighter when there's light, and it's definitely going to appear darker when there's not. And I don't think the wall should naturally be that color gray. I go ahead and resize our image to a power of 2. Now I'm going to do my offset to make sure that this thing's tileable as well. So offset 1024 by 1024. Now let's use our healing brush to fix everything in there. Make it a little bit larger and just start dabbing here and there. This wall texture could be used vertically or horizontally in the future. So I do kind of just go in there and dab here and there and make sure it works. But that's when I also noticed the horrible gradient effect that I've got going on, where one side of the image is much brighter than the other. And that's when I realized that I didn't offset that layer. So rather than try to fix everything, what I end up doing is just, basically deleting the layer and duplicating it again. And I go through the exact same process where I invert it. I change the levels to be really high. I blur the heck out of it so that I'm not affecting my high frequency noise or my high frequency information. And then I overlay it. And then I play with the alpha on it. You can see immediately right there, the whole thing turns very neutral, and I become very happy with that. I flatten the layers, and then I offset it back to the way it was before. There we go. And now I have my basic wall texture that I can use for any wall in FNAF at the moment. I go ahead and paste that in, and you know what? Not so bad. Works for me. Still some work we got to do in the future. Got to grime it up some more, make it look a little bit more dirty maybe. Maybe put some prints or something somewhere. But for the most part, it's going to work for us. We're still going to have to take time making the bump map and everything else, but it shouldn't be a problem. So let's go ahead and save out the PSD file first. There we are. Creating a new folder now to be a little bit more organized with things called bathroom. And we're just going to save that inside. Now we're going to save it as a PNG so we can actually bring it into Maya easily. Going to do the same convention, create a bathroom folder, and just go from there. Alright, well that's pretty much it for Photoshop. Now we can close this on out and come into Maya, and we're going to right click and put a new material on it, Phong type. Make sure we give it a name. And then once we've done that, we go and work on our diffuse color or our albedo color, and we grab under our bathrooms folder the wall texture. And there you have it, our less than perfect wall, but it does a great job. It's a template wall that we're going to use. We can use this texture over and over and over again. We know it's going to tile. We could even, if we had this to be the right size, just continue to make this happen over and over and over again. But anyway, we're all done here for right now. Remember, like, dislike, or subscribe if you want more material like this. I'll see you guys in the next video. George out.